All right, so before we begin, I would just like to state for the record that today is April 4th, 2022, and my name is Ben Bauman, and I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm speaking via phone with Marc Carmichael, who is in Louisville, Kentucky, and we are doing an interview for the Indiana Legislative Oral History Initiative. So, just starting off, when and where were you born?
I was born in 1950 in Muncie, Indiana.
Okay, and what were your parents' names?
My mother's name was Norma, and my dad's name was Robert Carmichael.
When did your family move to Indiana?
Well, as long as I can remember, my family has been in Indiana. Many generations back.
Wow, okay.
So I think I had a cousin who worked on the family tree, and if I remember right, he had names going well back into the 1800s.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so a long time.
What were your parents' occupations?
My dad was a teacher and a coach, and then a public school administrator in the Muncie school system. And with 6 kids, my mom stayed home.
And did you have any siblings?
I have 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm the oldest of 6.
All right.
Yeah.
So how would you describe your childhood?
Typical Indiana country existence. We lived north of Muncie in Delaware County, and we played among ourselves and the neighborhood kids. I rode the bus to school for 12 years, same bus driver.
Wow.
And we had a very good time. We, like most of our friends and neighbors, had very modest income, with my dad being a school teacher and my mom being a homemaker. But we had a lot of fun. We played sports from the beginning that I can remember. My brother and I played out in the yard, changing the sport with the season. And my sisters were cheerleaders, and then they all turned out to be public school teachers. I'm the only one who was never a public school teacher. Even my brother Bruce spent some time teaching and coaching before taking over his wife's family business. So I have aunts and uncles who are public school teachers, cousins. It's just a long tradition in our family to be involved in public education.
Yeah, sounds like it for sure.
Yeah.
So who were the most influential people in your childhood?
Well, certainly my parents, but then also the coaches that I had growing up. And I had an Uncle Dan, my dad's younger brother, who was very influential in our lives. And then we also had an Uncle Corwin, who was a World War I veteran, who would come out and bring us cheap candy and talk to my mom for hours on end. And he was fun. I had a really great growing up. Our grandparents were all close in the Muncie, Delaware County area, and so there were lots and lots of family gatherings for birthdays and holidays, and my brothers and sisters and I and our cousins would enjoy getting together and playing together all those years. It was a very wonderful childhood.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sounds like there's a lot happening and a lot of things to do.
Always something to do. And then if it was a rainy day, then I like to read. I would usually read until I had a headache, and then I'd have to quit. But so anyway, sports and school and family gatherings dominated my early life.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. What schools did you attend growing up?
I attended Royerton School. Royerton was started out as a township school, Hamilton Township School, and back in the days when most townships had a school. And so I started there as a first grader and graduated from there. The name had changed by the time I graduated, but I was in the same building all 12 years.
Okay.
A very small school. We've consolidated the year before my senior year. And so I went to Royerton for 11 years and then graduated from what's now called Delta High School.
Okay, got it. And how would you describe your educational experiences?
Well, we had a lot of fun, and we learned a lot along the way. It was a small school, and so everybody participated in everything. And so I love to play sports, and so we just like we did as kids, we just changed by the season.
Yeah.
And we were so small. My class when I was a junior would have had about 75 kids in it. And then after we consolidated with two other smaller schools, my senior class still only had 145 students in it. So we all participated. And so when August rolled around, we showed up for 2-a-day football practices, and then we played football through the fall. And then those of us who played basketball, as soon as football was over, we would start practicing with the guys who had been practicing basketball earlier than us because we were wrapping up the football season. And then we would, as soon as basketball season was over, some would go out for track and the others of us would go out for baseball.
Yeah.
So it was just, it was a wonderful place to be because you had the opportunity to participate. And while sometimes we weren't very good, at least we were having a good time. And our parents certainly knew where we were because we were at school. We were either in class during the day or we were at some extracurricular activity after school. And then we'd come home tired and hungry and get our homework done and fall into bed and get up the next day and do it all over again. So it was a great growing up. Now, in terms of academics, I would say that they were not as rigorous as they are today. We had good teachers, and we had all the offerings that you would hope for in terms of math and science and foreign languages, as well as the regular basic courses. But I would say that our homework load was pretty light, and so we had a good time.
Right. Sure. Okay. So, how did you view Indiana growing up?
Well, you're in your own little world. It was. We were in the county area, the countryside. I was surrounded, depending on the crop rotation. Our house was either surrounded by corn or soybeans.
Okay.
Every once in a while, somebody would grow tomatoes but anyway, Indiana to me was small town. We didn't live in Muncie, which was a pretty good sized town at the time, which was 75 or 80,000. It had Ball State University and a lot of manufacturing a lot of blue-collar jobs before the automobile industry crashed.
Sure.
But we didn't go into town very much. My mom would go in and do grocery shopping, but, she'd bring those back out. We didn't go out to eat because we really couldn't afford it. And so, it was growing up in the country, making do with what was available either at your house or at your buddy's house next door or down the street. I didn't really think much about Indiana in comparison with any other part of the state or any other state.
Yeah.
Because I had never lived anywhere else.
Right.
And to me, this was just the way you grew up. I didn't learn much about how other people lived until I went off to college.
Okay. And so, tell me about your college experience then. What was that like?
Well, I ended up getting a local scholarship from Delaware County. A banker by the name of Oliver Storr had started the Muncie Banking Company back in the maybe late 1800s, early 1900s, and had left a substantial amount of money in a trust fund to send Delaware County students to college for all 4 years, tuition free. And so every senior who wanted to go to college in Delaware County always applied for the Storr Scholarship, as well as any other state or national scholarships that you might be eligible for. And I was lucky enough to win one of the Storr Scholarships when I was a senior at Delta.
Okay.
And when you filled out this application, you had to put on there your top 3 choices, and then they would decide based on how many scholarships the committee was going to give that year and the tuition at each college, because they had to, stay under their budget. So when I filled out my application, I asked my mom, well, what do you think I should put? And she said, well, where do you want to go? And I said, well, Notre Dame would be good. And I had also looked at some smaller schools to maybe play football. And she said, well, which school is the most expensive? And I said, well, Notre Dame. And she said, well, why don't you put Notre Dame and your second and third choice, and then, they may decide that they can't afford to send you to Notre Dame, but maybe they can send you to your second or third choice. And I said, oh, okay. And so they sent me to Notre Dame.
Wow.
And I was 18. I had never been out of Delaware County very much, hadn't done many things. And all of a sudden, I'm in this university up in South Bend where people come not only from all over the country, but literally from around the world.
Yeah.
And there are no fraternities. At that time, Notre Dame was still all male. And there were no fraternities. You lived in the dorms, and everyone lived there. There were no special facilities for athletes, so they lived in the dorms. And so your dorm life kind of became your campus life. And I was in a room with a fellow from Detroit, Michigan. Our neighbors next door were from Rochester, New York, and the guys across the hallway were from Chicago and a suburb of Detroit, which name escapes me right now. But anyway, it was the first time, really, that I had been thrown in with, these were basically Catholic boys who had fought and scratched their way through Catholic high schools to get to Notre Dame. I was this guy from Delaware County who just was lucky enough to win a local scholarship, and the truth is, I have no business here. I was no more prepared for the academic rigors of Notre Dame, and I struggled. These guys were a lot smarter than I was. They knew how to study. They made fun of the way I talked, and it was a tough 4 years for me because it was hard work.
Yeah.
I don't really look back like a lot of people look back on their college, their 4 years in undergrad as some of the most fun they ever had.
Right.
And I can't say that. I mean, we studied all the time. And if we weren't studying, we were drinking, just trying to get through the South Bend winter. And we would play intramural sports and go to ball games. Obviously, you went to the football games, you went to the basketball games, the hockey games, but it was all male. It was intense. Everyone was trying to succeed. A lot of their parents were paying the way, and so there was a lot of pressure, to live up to that investment. And I just found myself completely over my head. And I made it out in 4 years, and I'm glad now that I went there. But I don't look back on it as the most fun I had over a 4-year period. It was hard work.
Yeah.
And I guess that was didn't kill me. But looking back, having stayed in Indiana, I think I would have had more fun and done just as well if I had gone to IU or Purdue or Butler, or maybe one of the small schools. Like I looked at Wabash and I looked at Rose Poly, and ended up not going there to play football. But I think I would have had more fun and done just as well had I not gone to Notre Dame. And my family's not Catholic.
Yeah.
I like to tell people that I was affirmative action at Notre Dame. It was all male, 99% white, and Catholic. And their idea of diversity was a white male non-Catholic.
Yeah.
And that was me. They lowered their standards to get me in. And I just feel fortunate that Mr. Storr made it possible for not only me, but hundreds of kids from Delaware County to go to school for free. And then fortunate that I made it out of there. And it was hard work, but like I said, it didn't kill me. And it probably looked good then on every resume thereafter, to say that I went to Notre Dame. But it was an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, sounds like it. That's interesting.
And it was in the late 60s and early 70s during the time of the unrest over Vietnam and Cambodia. So it was a tough time to be in school from that perspective too.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of turmoil from external forces, and then a lot of work in the classroom. So emotionally, it was a rough time.
Right. So let's see. Now, what did you major in college?
I majored in radio and television. They called it communication arts.
Oh, okay.
And I was just sure that I was going to be the next Johnny Carson.
Okay.
We didn't know about David Letterman yet. But,
yeah.
I was just sure that I was going to be either a big-time radio disc jockey in Chicago or television. And then as my senior year came to an end and I started interviewing and looking around for jobs in that industry, it became apparent that, they weren't that crazy about hiring me. And the jobs didn't pay anything. And most of what was out there was like late night and weekend stuff, and not in South Bend. So my wife at the time had a teaching job. We got married when I was a junior, and she moved to South Bend and had a teaching job in the South Bend community schools. And we decided that her job was more important than me taking some menial job at a little tiny radio station in Des Moines, Iowa, or something like that. So we stayed, and I then decided to interview, and I ended up working for then the university for 4 years after graduation. So I started off in the registrar's office before I graduated. I actually started before my senior year was over, and I was sort of in charge of my own graduation. Of course, the registrar is up on stage with the president and the distinguished guests during the graduation, but those of us who worked in the registrar's office, we were in charge of getting everybody lined up, getting everybody in their seats, making the program work. And so here I am, I'm in my cap and gown, but I'm also working the show. So that was an interesting start to my time at Notre Dame. I spent 2 years then working in the registrar's office, and then I shifted over to the Athletic and Convocation Center and helped them put on the events that took place there. In addition to the athletics, there were concerts, and there were banquets, and there were weddings, and there were conventions, and that was an interesting place to work.
Yeah.
I was in charge of purchasing the alcohol for the university. We only had one alcohol permit, and it was there at the Athletic and Convocation Center. So I was in charge of purchasing the alcohol for that permit, and doing so, I met all the suppliers, local beer, wine, and liquor suppliers, and one of those was the Budweiser distributor, United Beverage Company, there in South Bend, and they made me an offer to come on board as their operations manager. So I made that move and worked there from 1976 to 79. And then my wife and I moved back to the Muncie area so that our kids could have the same kind of growing up we did, and that was around family and family gatherings. We were burning the roads up between South Bend and Muncie, trying to keep our kids involved in family events, and they were real young. They didn't know their own family. They would cling to us because we were the only people they knew. And so we decided once driving back from a Christmas that all things being equal, as a teacher, she could get a job in Muncie. I could look for other work, and we should probably move back. So we left South Bend. I left South Bend. She left South Bend in 79. So I was there from 1968 to 1979 in South Bend, either as a student or working for either Notre Dame or United Beverage Company.
Okay, interesting. Now, in what ways did your awareness of politics sort of develop when you were in college?
I like to say that when I was growing up, we really didn't talk politics as a family.
Okay.
We were not political. We were sports oriented, or school oriented.
Yeah.
Or work oriented. And but politics was not discussed at the dinner table. My dad came from a Republican family. My mother came from a Democrat family. But politics was not a driving force in our lives growing up. So I go off to Notre Dame, and it's 1968, and, things in Vietnam are not good. Things in Cambodia were not good. Richard Nixon defeats McGovern in 72, and my first vote, because then we couldn't vote until we were 21. My first vote for president was for McGovern, and it was really those years at Notre Dame that took me from being apolitical to being a Democrat. And it was the Nixon administration that basically, as I sorted things out, I thought, if this crowd is the Republican Party, I must be a Democrat.
Yeah.
So those 4 years at Notre Dame basically is how I became a Democrat.
Okay, interesting. And so how did you then become seriously involved in politics?
Well, my wife and I moved back to Muncie in 1979, and I took a job with the overhead door company of Hartford City as a sales rep, and did that job for a year, and met some fellows from the Chesterfield Lumber Company in the Anderson area, and they offered me a job to be a sales rep for them, and I took it and worked for them for almost 10 years, and they were involved in Republican politics. More than average. I mean, they were involved in their community in Republican politics. I was kind of the token Democrat, and but I really wanted to be involved in the Muncie area in Democrat politics, and so I approached my employers in 1984 and said I'd like to dip my toe in the water and run for county commissioner in Delaware County. And they were very supportive because they did similar things in the Anderson area.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, that year, there was an incumbent county commissioner, and myself, along with 4 others, challenged this individual in the primary and got soundly thumped. I believe I came in 4th in a 5-person primary, and the only person I beat never showed up to any of the events, just kind of phoned it in.
Okay.
I beat that person, but the others beat me like a drum. But I got dressed up in my suit and tie, and I went to the events. I had my little 3x5 cards where I told them how I was going to change the world and make Delaware County, the best place to live on earth. And they all nodded and then didn't vote for me. And so I went away kind of with my tail between my legs and went back to work, selling for Chesterfield Lumber Company. And then my mother-in-law was working at Ball State University, and she came home one day with this flyer that Ball State, I don't remember if this was the first session or it was an early session of what they call the Bowen Institute, which was named after former Governor Doc Bowen. And it was a weekend-long seminar, multiple presenters over many different topics about how to become involved and how to succeed in politics. And she said, it's only $100 or something, and you might really enjoy this. And this was in 1985. I had just gotten thumped in 1984, and I'd had enough time to lick my wounds, and now I'm ready to get better at this. I don't want to finish fourth in my next race. And so I met a lot of interesting people who were already involved in politics. I took notes, and most importantly, I met the Democrat faculty members at Ball State, and we became friends. We're still friends to this day. We don't stay in touch like we used to, but we're still friends. And I went away with a lot better knowledge of the political system. I went away understanding all the mistakes I made in 1984, and I went away determined to try again and do better. And so I began thinking about 1986. But so was the Democrat Party in Delaware County. They were also thinking about 1986. And in Delaware County, the Democrats are always famous for having two factions: the faction that's in power and the faction that wants to be in power. And so I got approached by both camps, each of whom had a race that they wanted me to run on their behalf that was a suicide mission.
Okay.
And I wasn't interested in a suicide mission, and I wasn't interested in getting beat twice, and I really wasn't interested in the job that even if I had won, I didn't want the job, like, county assessor.
Yeah.
What do I know about being county assessor,
Right.
or county clerk? Well, it's just so happened that, these factions, that those offices were held by somebody that they wanted to defeat. And they saw me as a possible winner. They were somewhat impressed by my appearance and, my ability to speak to a crowd or to, work the crowd and be a decent person. So both camps approached me about running in 1986 simply because they had a mission and they saw me as maybe a way to win it. I was thinking more about the Indiana General Assembly because it was a part-time job. You didn't have to give up your day job. If I had been elected to a county office, I wouldn't have been able to keep my job at Chesterfield Lumber Company.
Yeah.
So I began thinking about the Indiana General Assembly. Well, the Indiana State Senator from my area, the two of them, actually, who came together kind of in the middle of Delaware County, were both Democrats. So I wasn't going to take them on. I'd already tried that once, and that didn't work. So, but the state representative where I lived was a Republican. The problem was he was the Republican Speaker of the Indiana House.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I thought, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't have anything to lose, I guess. And so I approached these professors at Ball State that I had met, and I said, guys, we had lunch at the student union or something one day in the fall. This is after the Bowen Institute. This was now in the fall of '85. And I said, boys, been thinking about running for the Indiana General Assembly. And they're all excited until they realize that what I'm suggesting is that we take on the Speaker of the House. And they were very excited, both from a political standpoint and friends and Democrats. They were excited, and they got me excited. And so we began to meet and plan about this race, and then Hurley Goodall was a state rep from Delaware County, a Democrat. And when I told him about this, first everybody who knew anything at all about politics would roll their eyes and say, well, you can't win. And I said, oh, I know, but, this is I want to run again. I don't want one of these local county offices. I want to try and get to the Indiana General Assembly. I'm from this family of public school teachers, and I think I can be helpful, for public schools, for Ball State, and for me to kind of scratch this itch that I have, about being involved in politics as a Democrat. And so Hurley said, well, this winter, when we're in session, come down to the State House, and I'll get you in. You can sit on the side where the visitors can sit, or up in the balcony. And he said you can see the process, and I'll introduce you around to Democrat leaders, and you'll get to know people.
Yeah.
So I took him up on it. That winter, I made several appearances down at the State House, which was easy for me to do in my job, because my job was to travel around Indiana selling our products from Chesterfield, so I could find myself in Indianapolis any day I wanted to. So I started going to the State House in the winter of '85, and soon people began to realize that I was serious, that I was going to challenge J. Roberts Daley, Bob Daley, who was the Speaker of the House. And it really got me jump-started. Those visits to the State House got me jump-started, not only with the Democrat Party, but with interested groups, Democrat-leaning groups who were looking for good candidates in important races. And so I would go to the occasional Democrat fundraiser. When the session ended that day, I might hang around and try and meet more of the lobbyists out in the hallway. And as the filing deadline came and went, I'm the only Democrat who filed to run against Bob Daley, so I don't have to worry about a primary opponent, which is good and bad, really, when you're starting out and don't have much name recognition. A primary opponent is not all that bad because it gets you out, your name out there,
right.
And more people know about you at the end of this primary period than they would as if you didn't have a race. And so anyway, had mixed emotions. I was glad not to have an opponent, obviously. But I then got approached by a man by the name of Bob Margraff, who was the chief lobbyist for the Indiana State Teachers Association. And he said that they had met as a group and had chosen me as their number one target in the House. I was going to be their top priority in the House. And I went home, and my wife said, well, how'd the meeting go? And I said, well, he said that ISTA is going to make me their number one project, their number one target. And she said, well, what does that mean? And I said, quite honestly, I don't know. I don't know. So Bob hooked me up with the local president of the Muncie Teachers Association, a woman by the name of Pat Eddy, and she became my campaign manager. And so her job, because she didn't know much about politics at the time, her job then was to garner support from the teachers in the district, and she did a great job. We had captains in every school building, elementary, middle school, high school. There were captains who were in charge of the teachers in their building, and to get volunteers to walk door to door, to put yard signs out, to stand at the polls on election day. At the same time, I have this very large family. By now, my sisters are all school teachers. My brother Bruce had been a school teacher and a coach. My dad was in the Muncie school system. They all taught where we grew up, and where we grew up is where the district is.
Yeah.
And so the truth is, if I had drawn my own district, this is what I would have drawn. I mean, these are the townships and the areas in Delaware County that I would have included in a map that I wanted to run in. It couldn't have been better. And there's no way that Bob Daley and his camp could have seen this coming. I mean, this was like the perfect storm of family and teachers in a district that everybody knew the Carmichaels.
Yeah.
And so I started walking door to door in July. I worked in Anderson. That's where the Chesterfield lumber's in Anderson. I live in Muncie. The whole district lies between us. And so every night after work, I would drive to the district and walk for a couple of hours in a precinct and hand out literature. And I started the last week of July, and I walked door to door all of August and all of September and all of October and November up to Election Day. And as in the beginning, I was walking by myself, and there were only 29 precincts in the district. So I had broken them down into solid Democrat precincts, swing precincts, and solid Republican precincts. Well, since nobody knew my name, since I didn't have a primary opponent, I had to start in the Democrat precincts because they didn't know me either. And so I walked quickly. I handed out my brochure. I did not ask for questions. I just kept moving, thanked them for their time, said, please look this over when you get a chance. I'd really appreciate your vote. Boom, on to the next house. I didn't have time to talk. I didn't have time to register anybody. I just had to keep moving. And it's hot. It's August. And so I would walk Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I took Friday nights off, and I walked Saturday and took Sunday off. I lost a lot of weight. I never looked better. But by the end of all this, I was absolutely exhausted. By the time we got to Election Day, I just didn't have any more gas in the tank. And the pictures that we took at my parents' house the weekend before the election, you can see it. I mean, everybody else is beaming, and I'm just kind of grimacing. I don't have anything left. So we did register a lot of new voters along the way, especially at Ball State. Ball State University was in the district. The students had really never been motivated to vote in the elections, and so they weren't registered to vote. So we set up tables at Ball State and registered students to vote in Muncie for the first time. And so that was a huge effort that teachers did. And so election day comes. We've done all this work. We've got all these signs up. We got people at every poll, teachers and family. They've all got aprons on that say Marc Carmichael, state rep. They got brochures in their pockets. We've got a rotation where some people work the morning shift and some people work the afternoon shift. In the middle, sometimes there wasn't anybody at a poll, but most of the time, every poll had one or two workers all day long. My mom and dad worked a poll where they voted every year. And my mom had so many people backed up to talk to her that every once in a while my dad would have to pull her aside and say, Norma, these people need to vote. They need to get moving. But she insisted on talking to everyone. And in a precinct that normally voted 60% Republican, I got 60% of the vote. And so the family connections were unbelievable. We put my sisters at the schools where they taught if there was a poll there. And so at the end of the day, I not only beat him, but I beat him by 18 percentage points, 59% to 41%. And when the results started coming in, and back then, we just had radio and for election returns in Delaware County. So when the results started coming in from these precincts that had been historical Republican precincts, and they were voting for me, not only were they voting for me, but they were voting for me 60-40.
Yeah.
The analyst on the radio said, well, I think these numbers have been reversed. He said, there's no way that Marc is winning that precinct by that margin. I mean, that's got to be a Bob Daley precinct. Well, it wasn't. I mean, it was a total landslide. And I knew it 2 weeks before the election because I had done the Democrat precincts early, and I had done the independent precincts in like September, and I'd saved the Republican precincts for last just in case I didn't get there, just in case I couldn't get that far. But I did get that far, and I was walking Republican precincts, and there were my signs were in their yards, and people were telling me that they were going to vote for me, and I was shocked. I didn't expect that reaction when
Sure.
I got to those Republican precincts. So I knew I couldn't. I mean, nobody would have believed me. I didn't tell anybody, but I knew 2 weeks before the election that I was going to win. I didn't know I was going to win so big, but there was no doubt in my mind the last 2 weeks that I was going to win. And I did win by a lot. And we have tape, we have videotape. I don't know that it's been converted to DVDs, but we have videotape from the newscasts then that night and the next day where everyone was shocked that the Republican speaker had not only been beaten, but beaten by such a wide margin.
Yeah.
And then when I came down to the State House for organization day, then the cameras were just everywhere. There were 9 Democrats who won Republican seats in that election, so the House Democrats went from 39 seats the day before the election to 48, and so there were a lot of good stories that could have been told and were eventually told, I'm sure, in local papers. But all the attention that day was on me. It was embarrassing because I knew all these other candidates. They were friends of mine, and they had won tough races too, and many of them with help from the Indiana State Teachers Association and other groups. But no, all the focus was on me that day, and I was really glad when, well, you love the attention, but I was glad when that day was over and we could kind of get back to normal. But it was a heck of a ride. I mean, it was hard work. We started from nothing and started with, talking to the Ball State guys, and then the teachers got involved, and then my family, which I said earlier had been apolitical, and I don't know how they voted over the years, my family members. I remember in the primary when I had no opposition, I was still on the ballot, and so my dad goes into this precinct where they had been working the polls on election day. He goes into this precinct to vote, and he asked for a Democrat ballot. And the woman working the table said, well, Bob, you don't have to vote Democrat. Mark doesn't have an opponent. And he said, my son's on the ticket. I'm voting for my son. So that, I think I drug my family from being apolitical, and I drug my dad from being a Republican into, at least for me, the Democrat camp.
Yeah.
And so my family was slow to come to the realization that this is serious. And, he's got a heck of a chance. And they were totally involved, I would say, from Labor Day on. Up to Labor Day, they were busy with their own summers and travel and, vacations and that sort of thing, work. But after Labor Day, they were totally engaged. Everybody had their T-shirt. Everybody was walking with me in parades, handing out candy. I really drug them deep into elected politics, and I think they were really happy to help, and then I think they were really glad when I got out because they really didn't like the grind, the criticisms that go with being in elective office. And if you're not a political animal yourself, you really don't enjoy any of it. So,
right, yeah.
The first race was the best one. It's always easier, when you're the challenger. But then when you're the incumbent, especially the first time you run as the incumbent, there's no fun in it. It's just hard work, and you're taking all the arrows. Instead of slinging the arrows, you're taking them. And it's not nearly as much fun to be the incumbent as it is to be the challenger. So I ran 2 more times and got elected both times. I served in the minority for my first 2 years. The second 2 years was the 50-50 tie back in 1988, where nobody knew what to do. There were no rules about a tied house. And so we went in there to organize on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and we didn't get out of there after hammering out an agreement between the two parties. We didn't get out of there until about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving Day. And we ended up with 2 of everything. 2 speakers who alternated days, 2 committee chairmen who alternated meetings, and equal representation on every committee, with the rule that if a bill tied up in committee, it got reported to the floor.
Right.
And so thousands of bills, it seems like, made it out of committee on a tie vote and went to the floor. And then I really didn't want to run again in 1990. I was really ready to get out after 4 years, but the Democrats wanted to draw the maps. They hadn't drawn the maps probably in 20 years or so. And I don't remember the last time the Democrats drew the maps before 1991. So I agreed to run one more time, held the seat. Democrats drew the maps, and then I stepped down. And Pat Eddy, who had been my campaign manager and still was the president of the Muncie Teachers Association, then she filled out my term in 1992. But then, unfortunately, she got beat in that race. And so she only got to serve the short session in 92, which I'm grateful for. I mean, at least she got to do that and always be known as a state rep. So that was bittersweet. But I really enjoyed the race, and the first race against Bob Daley, and I'm glad I was able to win the other two, but they weren't nearly as much fun.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Let's see. Thinking about some of your experiences then in the General Assembly, what were your expectations for the legislative process going in? Did you feel like you were prepared for that, or was it a learning curve? Or
well, I think coming down the session before in the wintertime in '86 gave me a really good perspective of what to expect.
Yeah.
From the way the House ran itself and the committee process and the building itself, where everything's located and that sort of thing. But I wasn't prepared for how important the politics was as opposed to the policy. Our first meeting after we were elected in '86 that was organized by the Democrat Party, the first meeting we attended was on how to get reelected.
Yeah.
There was no discussion about how to file a bill or, how to work with constituents, or there was no discussion about public policy. The entire discussion was about how to get reelected. And that was an eye-opener for me. I didn't expect that. But then I came to learn that the most important thing, especially to the leadership of each caucus, is to be the leader, to be in charge, to run the show. And the rest of us, especially those of us who had just arrived, were kind of in the back rows to, just to vote when called upon and learn along the way, certainly. But the most important thing to the leaders is to be the leader. And for them to be the leader, you have to get reelected. And for you to get reelected, these are the things you need to do. And so, we did them, and we learned along the way, because when we came in, we were in the minority. Now it was a close split, 52 to 48. And when I came in, each caucus had conservatives and moderates and liberals.
Okay.
Each caucus.
Yeah.
And so it was an eye-opener for me that there were conservative Democrats. And I sat next to one after the '88 election, good friend, Dale Grubb, from Covington, Indiana. And Dale is a conservative Democrat. And I guess I didn't know they were out there. So anyway, and there were liberal Republicans. And so the 52-48 split in my first 2 years was an eye-opener, because I would see Democrats who couldn't vote for things that I thought were logical, but then we'd be joined by some liberal Republicans and might have gotten it passed. So that was a good time when each caucus had that split, and we were all friends. We all became friends across the aisle. After we got done with our work, we would go out to eat together, and we had a bowling tournament every year with a big trophy that either sat on the Republican side of the up at the front of the chamber or the Democrat side, depending on who won the bowling tournament that year.
Okay.
They don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, we had a basketball game at what was then Market Square Arena, where we divided up. These weren't Republican and Democrat teams. They were split bipartisan teams, and on my team was Evan Bayh. He was Secretary of State. And so, we had fun. As Democrats and Republicans, we would argue over issues, but when the day was done, we had fun together. They don't do that these days. It's too partisan. The gerrymandered maps have made the whole system break down. But we weren't that way. In 1986, the maps had been drawn in 81, but they weren't sophisticated. They weren't using computers. They were just kind of getting together as the majority caucus and deciding among themselves what their district should look like. And it was kind of out of your shirt pocket kind of a deal, not out of a computer. Well, now it comes out of a computer specially designed by the majority party to make their majority even stronger in the fall.
Yeah.
The problem it causes is that now you have to be such a hardliner to win your primary. Now all we're doing is sending hardliners from both parties, and it's not just Indiana. It's all over the country. It's in the Congress.
Yep.
The gerrymandered maps are doing nothing but sending us hardliners who can't negotiate, can't compromise, because then they can't go back and win their primaries. And so it's a ridiculous thing, and it's all because of gerrymandering. And it needs to be abolished, and we need to get to nonpartisan commissions that draw maps for the people and not for the politicians.
Right.
Back then, the politicians were drawing the maps, and they might start off pretty strong, but as the decade wore on and people moved around, the maps would break down a little bit, and that's why I was able to beat a Republican speaker, and the other 8 Democrats that won that year were able to beat a Republican incumbent, was because the maps didn't draw impossible districts. And so, again, when I got there, I was surprised at how important politics were to the leadership.
Yeah.
Now, those of us in the back of the room, we still think we're going to make the world a better place. So we're filing bills, either liberal or either liberal bills or conservative bills, bills for the environment, bills for cutting taxes. I mean, we were filing bills left and right thinking these are all going to get heard and they're going to get passed, and life in Indiana will have never been better. Well, that's not the way it works. You can file your bills. Getting them passed, getting them heard is hard. Getting them passed is worse. And then when it goes to the other chamber, it may or may not get heard. It may get changed quite a bit. And you may end up in conference committee where it could be completely different by the time that process is over. So it's a great learning experience. I wish everybody could do it because they would have a better understanding about how this country works and how they can have an impact on things either through an association or through a lobbyist, but if they don't want to be a legislator. But at the end of the day, politics trumps policy.
Right.
Okay. Once you learn that, now you can decide, well, do I want to be here for a long time? Do I want to fight the system? I have a lot of admiration for legislators who stayed because they were determined to make people's lives better, even if they got beat up year after year after year. Every once in a while they'd get a little victory, and it was enough to keep them going. I wasn't that way. Once I learned that politics trumped policy, I lost interest because I wasn't there to see how long I could stay. I was there to try and do things, get things done. And I guess I didn't have the patience to stay and stay and stay. I had a young family, and I quickly found out that while we call it a part-time legislature, it's actually a full-time job.
Yeah.
And, it really takes more of your time than you could ever imagine. Not just in Indianapolis, but back home in the district. Because, once you're a legislator, then lots of people want to hear from you. Lots of groups want to have you come, have a meal, be the speaker, tell them what's going on. It takes a lot of time. And when you're new, you want to make everybody happy, and so you go to everything. And it takes a lot of time. So it becomes a full-time job around which you have to keep your other job going unless you're retired. And that's what's happening more and more, is that legislators are retired and they do it full time. Back then it was more, especially from the young legislators that I came in with, we all had jobs, and most of us had families, young families. And so unless your spouse and your family are totally supportive, then it can kind of rub them the wrong way, how much you're gone. And that becomes then a dilemma for state legislators, can I keep all these balls in the air or not? So I was ready to leave after the 89 session, and then I agreed to run one more time, and it wasn't any fun at all. And the session then in 91, where Evan Bayh is governor, the Democrats control the House, the Republicans control the Senate, and we were there for a regular session and two special sessions, and didn't finish until like June 15th. And I said, I'm leaving. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's all about politics.
Right.
Trying to make the other side look bad, or not willing to spend this much money on things that we desperately need to spend money on. And I just got sick of it. And so by that time, I had a job at Indiana Gas Company. I had left Chesterfield Lumber and went to work for Indiana Gas. And if I left the legislature, then I could be their full-time lobbyist. I could still be at the State House, with everybody that I like to be with. But I didn't have to raise any money. I didn't have to run for re-election. And so I kind of saw it as the best of both worlds. And that's really what it turned out to be. I haven't left the State House since I arrived in 1986. I still have a client. I like to think I'm retired, but I still have one client. Actually, it still turns out to be Indiana Gas. I've had them all along. Their name has changed several times, and now it's CenterPoint. Vectren was bought out by CenterPoint a couple of years ago. So I'm still there, still having a good time. I don't come around much anymore because of the pandemic, but I try and do everything that I need to do. by text or phone. So I imagine I'll start spending a little more time over there, starting with this next session. But hopefully there won't be another strain come along that shuts everything down again. But
definitely.
So when I was a freshman legislator, I had just defeated the Republican Speaker of the House. That means that I'm a hero on one side of the aisle, and to many on the other side of the aisle, I'm really a piece of crap. And so some of them, not all of them, some of them went out of their way to give me a hard time, and I just took it, in stride. And at the end of the session, at least one prominent Republican who had tried to give me a hard time came up and said, "I just wanted to tell you that several of us in our caucus set out to make your life miserable, but you handled it so well, and you're such a nice guy that we're sorry." And I thanked him and knew that I had, made a lot of strides in winning them over. And from then on, I was treated just fine. This 50-50 tie was fun and chaotic all at the same time. And then by then I was on Ways and Means and really wanted to start spending money on public education, on Ball State University, and the environment, liberal causes that had brought me there in the first place.
Yeah.
And Evan Bayh was governor and didn't want to spend any money because that would help his reelection and getting Republican votes around the state by being more conservative than I wanted him to be. So that was frustrating. It was frustrating to be in the majority on Ways and Means and not able to spend money on projects that were important to me. And Evan Bayh made our caucus so mad that year that several times Mike Phillips, who was Speaker, would have to take us to caucus for several hours while everybody vented about how much they hated Evan Bayh and how much they hated having to toe the line on his spending priorities rather than doing what we wanted to do. And Mike would just sit there and listen, nod his head, point to the next speaker whenever it was their turn. And he would keep us there until we were just exhausted. And he would say, "Well, seems to me we got two choices. We can either go down and vote against this, however you want, or we can go down and show the state of Indiana that we can govern as a party." So then he would ask, who here then needs to vote against the governor and the party? Not a hand would go up. Not one. When he went into that room, he might have had 10 votes in his pocket. And when he came out, he had 52 every time. And we still talk today about how much we learned about leadership, political leadership, from those sessions with Mike Phillips in the caucus room. He came out of that room with 52 votes for Evan Bayh's package every damn time. And it didn't do any good. The state of Indiana did not reward the House Democrats along the way. So I guess, we never looked like a disjointed party, but we really never got rewarded for sticking together for Evan Bayh's package. Evan did, but we didn't. So anyway, I left and have enjoyed a great career in the State House as a lobbyist, first for Indiana Gas for about, from 91 to 99 for 8 years. And then I got approached by the Indiana beer wholesalers. Their state executive was going to retire, and they wondered if, based on my background back at South Bend in the beer business, and I had carried some legislation for them while I was a legislator, if I would be interested in taking over their association. And I really was. It was an industry that had always interested me. And so I took their job in 99 and did that until 2020. So I did that for 21 years.
Okay.
And it was a great run. Along the way, I kept Vectren Centerpoint as a client, and I stepped down from the beer wholesalers gig, but I kept Vectren because while the beer wholesalers dominated my time, Vectren as a utility, doesn't need that much effort on my part. So I like to tell people they don't pay me much, and I don't do much, so it works out great.
Okay. Let's see. Thinking about your time in the General Assembly and the legislation that you worked on, do you remember the first bill you sponsored or authored in the General Assembly?
I co-authored with Representative Marc Carmichael a bill that would prohibit the implosion. Now think about this. It would prohibit the implosion as a way of destroying animals at the Humane Society. It turns out in Monroe County back then, the way they put down cats and dogs was they had a chamber that they put them in that sucked out all the oxygen. And I guess they thought this was humane. I don't know.
Gosh, yikes.
Yeah, I know. And so anyway, I co-sponsored that. I didn't author it, but I co-sponsored it with Marc Carmichael. That passed. And so that was fun. Then in the 50-50 tie, when you're in the minority, like I was the first 2 years, you don't get to do much.
Yeah.
You don't get to author much of anything. And if you do author it, it's either A, not going to get a hearing, or B, it's not going to pass.
Right.
So in the next 2 years, we're in a 50-50 tie, and now you can get your bills heard because you have a Democrat chairman of the committee at least every other meeting. So Republicans would go to the Republican chairman to get their bills heard, and then Democrats, conversely, would go to the Democrat chairman to get theirs heard. So I had a bill in, I think it was in the 20, let's see, it was in the, I keep getting my decades mixed up. It was in the 90 session. No, 88 session. Sorry. So 88, we're tied, and I go to the Democrat chair and say, I've got this bill that would prohibit a company from firing a person who turns out to be positive with AIDS.
Okay.
Now, a friend of mine, her brother had AIDS and was being discriminated against in the workplace. And so she came to me and said, it's not fair. Yes, he's got AIDS, but, he's not going to transmit it in the workplace. Well, this was back when people were very afraid of AIDS and very homophobic. And so he looked at me and he said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "This is not fair. There ought to be a law." So anyway, I authored this bill that prohibited discrimination. I guess it prohibited discrimination in the workplace for people who tested positive with AIDS. He gave it a hearing. And as you might imagine, it was a tough hearing, and a lot of business groups testified against it. And let's see, it did not come out of committee. It was one vote short, but it created a heck of a firestorm back home in Delaware County. It was not popular in Delaware County, and I got a lot of messages. Back then, they would be on the phone. There wouldn't be text or anything like that. Hateful messages. That really the first time I'd ever been on the receiving end of that kind of vitriol. So that was an eye opener for me.
Yeah.
I had a woman, and you see, most of these bills come when somebody asks you to do something.
Right.
You don't just sit around thinking stuff up. So anyway, I had a woman who had been attacked by a dog while she was walking, and so I filed a dangerous dog bill that basically said, we're going to treat dogs like guns. It's your responsibility to keep it away from other people, and the penalties were pretty severe. It might have been a low-level felony, if I remember right, if there was serious injury or something like that. Anyway, the farming community came unglued. The Republican Party came unglued. The bill basically went nowhere. But then a couple of years later, a constituent of Paul Manweiler's, who was the new Speaker of the House, she got bit by a dog. And then they passed a dangerous dog bill.
Okay.
So I don't get credit, but I was on the cutting edge. See?
Right.
So that shows you it really all depends lots of times on legislation as to who wants it. If some freshman legislator in the back wants it, it really doesn't, it's hard to get anybody's attention. But if the speaker wants it, all of a sudden it's a good idea.
Yep.
And that's how so much legislation gets passed, is because someone in leadership wants it, and all of a sudden it's a good idea. It may not be the first time anyone ever had that idea, but it's a good idea. So anyway, I laugh when I see Paul Manweiler. At first I tell him, remember, I made you speaker because I beat J. Roberts Daly, and 2, I greased a path to your dangerous dog bill. So, I expect full credit.
There you go.
Which he's reluctant to give.
Sure.
Now he's a lobbyist, so now we can hang out together on the bench and tell old war stories.
So, how complex was it then to get a bill passed?
It's tough. It's really tough. First of all, it has to be a really good idea or a really non-controversial idea. Getting a controversial bill passed is really tough.
Yeah, I bet.
And so, first of all, you have to convince the chairman of the committee that this bill needs to be heard. Well, a chairman only has so many meetings that he or she can have during the first half of the session. If we're in the long session, the committee that you're interested in getting your bill heard, it might meet 3 or 4 times, and at each hearing hear 2 or 3 or 4 bills. So the committee chairman has to wait until all the bills are filed, and then all the bills that are assigned to his or her committee, they have to go through and read them and talk to the authors and prioritize which bills they're going to hear this session. And your job is to make sure that your bill first gets heard. Lots of times people file bills for constituents that even the legislator is not that crazy about.
Okay.
And so they don't push. They don't ask. They just, tell their constituent at the end of the session, well, our bill didn't get heard. Well, you know what? That happens a lot, where you just kind of use the committee system to get rid of a bill that you as the author weren't that crazy about in the first place. You're just doing somebody a favor.
Right.
I always feel sorry for legislative services, how many bills they write that are never going to see the light of day.
Yeah.
They work till midnight, night after night, trying to get these bills cranked out in time, when a lot of them are just a waste of time. But anyway, back to the committee process. So your first priority is to get your bill heard. And then if you need supporting testimony, to get those people lined up so that they're willing to come that day and wait their turn and testify in favor of your bill, knowing that opponents, if there are opponents, are going to be doing the same thing. On an easy bill, non-controversial bill, you can present it, and maybe a few lobbyists will stand up and say, we're in favor. But a tough bill takes a lot of work and a lot of preparation, not only on your remarks, but on the remarks of people there to support you. And so you have to orchestrate that so that they don't repeat the issues and make compelling arguments. And then you have to be able to handle the questions that come from committee members, which oftentimes have been supplied by opponents to your bill to try and trip you up.
Yeah.
So, you have to know the subject backwards and forwards, and then you have to do your work as the leader of this group to get your testimony lined up, not only yours, but maybe theirs. And then you have to handle the questions. You have to lobby the members of the committee to try and get them to vote for your bill. And then you have to have supporters of your bill also contact members of the committee because, we got to get this thing out of committee. So, and then committee members and the chairman can offer amendments to your bill that you either have to be supportive or you have to oppose. And if you're going to oppose, you got to do it in a kindly manner so you don't anger the author of the amendment or anyone else who might possibly vote for your bill at the end of the day. So that's delicate. Okay, so then we get to the vote, and, hopefully it passes. Well, that's just the first step. Now we got to go to the floor of the House, and now this bill is in front of 100 members, not just the, say, 8 or 10 members of the committee. Now, your workload has increased, and you've got to lobby a larger group of people if it's a controversial bill. If it's non-controversial, if the committee kicks it out 10-0, then your job is much easier on the floor of the House. But if it comes out split, and if the split is partisan, then you know that you've got your work cut out on the side of the chamber that, those committee members didn't vote for your bill. So that's hard work. The bill is going to be eligible for second reading amendments on the floor of the House, and they have to be filed in advance. So you have a chance to see what may be offered on your bill and get your arguments ready, because when you get to the floor of the House, there are no experts to help you. There's no additional testimony to help you. Now it's just you, one-on-one, up at the front with whomever is trying to make your bill better or worse. And that's, I think, where the process really breaks down, is when the legislators are left to their own devices and their own wits and their own knowledge and expertise up at the front of the chamber, when you can't turn to an expert and get exactly the right answer. And I've seen, oh gosh, it's hard to watch, really.
Yeah.
When two legislators go at it at the front of the chamber, and neither one of them knows what they're talking about. And it's painful. You want to just, stop the proceedings and go up and say, look, you both have it wrong, and yet this is how things happen, and hopefully it gets straightened out along the way. But that's why I don't watch the action on the floor of the Senate anymore, because I just can't take it.
Yeah.
We got so many issues and legislators carrying so many bills that they can't be experts on all this. And yet someone is counting on them to get this right. And you can't pass them a note. You can't talk to an earpiece in their ear. You just have to send them out there and hope for the best. And oftentimes it's just awful. So you got to get your bill then out of the House with a lot of misinformation floating around. You do get to go up and present your bill on third reading, whatever state it's in, whether it's in the original state or whether it's in the amended state. You get to go up and present your bill. You can use notes. You can read. I've seen people read 4 or 5 pages of 8.5 by 11 sheets of notes on a bill, and just go on and on and on. And then the opponents and your supporters can come to the mic and weigh in, and then we're going to have a vote. And hopefully, your bill passes out of the House, which is only the third step, because now you've got to get a Senate sponsor to sponsor it in the Senate, and they have to get a committee hearing. We start all over.
Yep.
And, step number 4 is the bill gets assigned to a committee. Now, your Senate author, who knows a lot less about this subject than you do, is going to rely on you to work the committee, to work the chairman. They'll be helpful. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they're going to, just like you would do on their bill, if they send it to you from the Senate to the House, you're going to be helpful. But they don't know nearly as much about this subject as you do by now. And so you've got to go over and do the same thing all over again in the Senate. You got to get supporters lined up. You got to lobby the committee. You got to lobby the chairman to get a hearing. You got to survive the hearing, and then it goes to the floor of the Senate, where the same thing happens with people going to the microphone who don't know what they're talking about, and your Senate sponsor down there trying to defend the language as best they can, and then hopefully you get it out of the Senate, step 5. And then, that was second reading amendments, step 5. Now you got to get it out of the Senate. That's step 6. And then, if it's been changed along the way, it'll go to conference committee, which is step 7. And then, if the conferees can agree on language, it still has to go back. Conferees would be step 8. Still has to go back to the House and Senate to be adopted. That'd be steps 9 and 10. And then you got to go to the governor and hopefully get a signature. So there's if I counted right, there's 11 steps to passing a bill. And you have to complete all 11 steps to pass a bill. If it fails anywhere along the line, your bill's dead. So killing legislation is so much easier than passing it, because all you have to do is win one round, and you can kill a bill. But you have to win all 11 rounds to pass it. And that's good. It really is good, except in a part-time legislature, a lot of good legislation either doesn't pass, or because there's not enough time to explain it properly, or it never gets a hearing in the first place. And, I think, now that I'm out, I think we ought to meet longer and do things a little better. But they're always in a hurry, and we have to go back and fix mistakes because we're always in a hurry. And, they pride themselves on getting out on time or getting out early. And I just think that life is too complex to be in a rush when it comes to the legislative process. But the party in control likes it that way, because the less legislation that is heard and passed and is moving, are the less times that they think they might lose control. So
yeah,
it's hard to pass a controversial bill, even if it's the right thing to do. So patience, takes a lot of patience.
Yeah, I can imagine. Let's see. So you've mentioned a lot about lobbying in the General Assembly, and obviously you've experienced it from both sides. How influential were lobbyists in the Indiana General Assembly?
Well, when you have a part-time legislature like Indiana does, then your staffing from the caucus standpoint is fairly minimal. When you go to Congress and lobby, they've got 5 or 6 staffers who focus on the committees that the member sits on and do a lot of research, and over the years have gained a lot of institutional knowledge, have a lot of resources. Well, you get back to Indiana with a part-time legislature. As a member, I would share with 2 or 3 other legislators, especially if you're in the minority, let's say 3. You would share one staffer with 3 people, 3 legislators.
Okay.
And mainly what they would do is deal with constituent stuff. Handle constituent phone calls, constituent emails, problems back in the district, get letters and things prepared for your signature, bring them down to the floor so you can sign while you're on the floor. But this one person is trying to keep up with 3 legislators, leaving them little or no time, let's just say no time, for any sort of in-depth research. And so lobbyists provide the in-depth research. Now, granted, the lobbyist is going to present research that supports their position, but then you got to remember, too, that there's probably, unless it's a non-controversial issue, there's probably lobbyists on both sides of the issue. So, as a legislator, you're going to get in-depth research slanted from the lobbyists, but you're going to get both sides.
Right.
If you take the time to read it, if you take the time to understand it. And so it's there, the research is there for the lobbyists before a vote, but it comes from lobbyists, not from staff.
Right.
And people just have to understand that unless you're willing to spend a tremendous amount of money, more than we spend now, for legislative staff, this is the way it's going to be. And I guess the comforting thing about that is that you can rest assured that you, as an individual, you have a lobbyist or two or three representing your side of the issues. You may not know it, but if you're, let's say you're over 65, the AARP supports a lobbyist, or if you're a retired teacher, they have a lobbyist. Everybody's got lobbyists that work for, that segment of the population that they live in. So if there's an issue before the General Assembly that's controversial, there are going to be lobbyists providing the legislators with information, but it's going to be on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Then I also wonder, how impactful are campaign donations or gifts in terms of influence on politicians when they're serving in the General Assembly?
Right. When I first started, the limits on entertainment were very loose, and the maximums were pretty high on what you could spend on a legislator.
Okay.
And there's no question that there's not time during the day, the legislative day. There's no time to really develop relationships. If you're talking to a legislator, you're imparting information, or you're giving them something to read, or you're asking them how do they intend to vote on a certain issue because you're keeping track. You pass in the hallways. You might chat for a few minutes before a committee meeting or a few minutes after a committee meeting, but the chance to really sit down and get to know someone does not really occur at the State House. It occurs outside of the State House, either at dinner or at a sporting event, or back in the district, back in their hometown, when you can meet for lunch and talk for an hour or so when they're back home and don't have the time constraints they have at the State House. So what happens is that you naturally gravitate as a lobbyist towards the legislators that you like, and you find ways to spend times with them, whether it's back in the district, playing golf, going out to dinner. Now, over time, that was more so back when I was a legislator in the 80s and early 90s. Since then, they have passed legislation and rules to severely curtail that sort of spending.
Okay.
And so there isn't nearly as much of it as there used to be. Now, a lobbyist can still take legislators to lunch or to dinner, but everything is to be reported to the Indiana Lobby Registration Commission. And how much does it impact the contributions or the spending? I don't think that contributions or spending amount to as much as any personal relationship that you can develop over time by doing things together.
Right.
And so you can't spend as much as you used to be able to spend, or you may have to report it more than you used to have to report it, but it's still really important for a lobbyist to get to know a legislator more than just on the surface. And the longer you're there as a legislator and the longer you're there as a lobbyist, you're more likely to make those good friendships between two people who like each other's company. And now, does that mean that every time you want their vote that you get it? No. But it does mean that every time that you send them a text, they're going to read it, or every time you ask to see them out in the hallway, they're going to come out and talk to you. Whereas if you don't have that personal relationship, then if you send them a text, they may not read it, or they may just look at it and delete it. Or if you ask them to come out in the hallway, they might not find the time. So for a lobbyist to do his or her job the best, they need to try and develop a good relationship with a legislator, and that takes time. And then they get, then they quit or get beat, and all that time goes out the door, and you got to start over. So I don't think it's the money. I mean, because they can't spend that much anymore. I just think it's the time spent, and oftentimes, it takes a lunch or a dinner to spend that kind of time. Legislators also are not that impressed by the dollars given, because there's very few. There are very few associations who give game-changing money. I mean, when you think about it, if a campaign is going to cost $250,000 or $300,000, then your $250 check, or maybe even a $500 check, is not going to make the difference.
Right.
It's not game-changing money. So when I would host a fundraiser, I certainly knew who was there. I certainly knew who contributed. Same thing today. I mean, they know who shows up, and they know how much they contributed. But when you have to contribute, let's say, to 150 legislators every year, you're going to write about the same check, 250. I mean, they have suggested amounts, 250, 500, whatever. But everybody's writing the same checks, and the checks, individual checks, don't make that big of an impression, because it's not enough money to make a difference. They all add up, obviously, to make the campaign affordable. But unless you drop 10 grand or 20 grand or 50 grand on somebody, it's just another campaign contribution of many, and they kind of cancel each other out because they're coming from all directions. Friends of yours and opponents, people that have opposed you on issues. You can't afford not to write a check. I've always argued that. You need to write a check, but it doesn't have to be a big one.
Yeah. Okay.
And not very many people write big checks.
Right.
There aren't, not people, but associations, groups. Even when I had the beer wholesalers, they could have written huge checks, but we wrote $500 checks, and we wrote them to everybody, Republicans and Democrats. I like to call it an access pack, where you want to be involved, but it's not a game-changing pack where you only write a handful of checks every year to, say, leadership or committee chairman, and they're $10,000. Now that's trying to make an impact with money. I liked a pack where you just wrote a relatively nice check to everybody. Well, if you do that, say if you write a $500 check to 150 legislators, that's $75,000.
Yeah.
You throw on leadership and governor and lieutenant governor and I don't know, whoever matters, attorney general, secretary of state. I mean, before long, you're at $100,000. But you haven't written a check really to any one individual that's going to change the outcome of their race. So I know people are opposed to campaign contributions, but it's an expensive game, and I just used to argue that you don't need to be writing big checks, but you need to be writing them to everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think in my time there, I don't think I've ever known of a contribution that really made a difference. I mean, to change somebody's vote or to change somebody's opinion, I've never known of one.
Right.
I mean, legislators expect you to write a check. So you write it. But they can't dictate how big it is. What dictates how big it is how large is your PAC? How much money do you have to spend annually? And then how do you want to allocate it? And in our case, it turned out to be a $500 check to everybody. And then that's $75,000. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, sure. What were the most controversial legislative issues during your time in the General Assembly?
Well, I carried a bill that was referred to by the opponents as a beer baron bill.
Okay.
And it was a kind of a technical issue that was unique to the beer industry. And so it was hard to get 150 legislators to understand why, first of all, alcohol is treated differently than any other product. I mean, you got to remember there's 2 amendments to the Constitution related to alcohol. The one that enacted prohibition and then the one that lifted it. So alcohol is treated differently because, it's a regulated product from the time it's made until the time it's consumed. And along the way, after prohibition, we created what's called the wholesale tier, where the manufacturer of alcohol cannot sell directly to the retailer. They have to sell first to their designated wholesaler, who then in turn sells it to the retailer. And we did that coming out of prohibition to prevent the producer of the alcohol and the retailer from selling it too cheaply. We wanted alcohol to be available, and we wanted it to be relatively affordable, but we didn't want it to be cheap. And so during or before prohibition, the suppliers were selling directly to the taverns and the bars, and it was not unheard of for, they were selling it too cheap, and they were causing a lot of problems in society.
Okay.
And it led to, among other things, prohibition. So coming out of prohibition, the decision was made to turn this industry from 2 tiers, supplier and retailer, into 3 tiers, supplier, wholesaler, and retailer. And I represent the middle tier, the wholesale tier. And Indiana, back during the Doc Bowen administration, had decided that wholesalers who had exclusive territories given to them by the brewer, that those were counterproductive, and they were going to open the state up so that wholesalers could go sell their beer anywhere they wanted, that the breweries could not designate an exclusive territory for their products to a wholesaler. And that went on from like 1978 to 2001. And it was devastating to the wholesaler industry. We started out with about 250 wholesalers, and by the time what was called transshipping was over. We were down to about 50, and it didn't lower prices to the consumers. The retailers quickly decided that there was no reason for them to sell beer cheap, even though they were able to play wholesalers off against each other to get cheap prices. They didn't have to pass it along to the consumer. So the savings that the state of Indiana had hoped would go into the consumer's pocket was going into the retailer's pocket. And along the way, we were losing family businesses, the wholesalers, left and right, because they were being undercut by people who were selling beer oftentimes at a loss, and then having these wholesalers having to declare bankruptcy. So anyway, knowing the beer business, I agreed to carry the bill, and it was a knockdown, drag-out fight the entire session. It was 1989. And every step along the way was a battle.
Okay.
And the retailers were buying full-page ads, calling us beer barons and trying to reestablish our monopolies. And there was a lot of rhetoric, a lot of heat, a lot of misinformation. Took me forever to explain, why this industry is different than others. But got it out of committee, got it through the House. It was a 60-40 vote in the House. Exactly 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats voted yes, and 20 and 20 voted no. So it was purely bipartisan. And a lot of it had to do with the local wholesalers that were left lobbying the legislators in their area to explain to them, why this system that was established under Doc Bowen was not only not working, but it was devastating to the industry, and the savings were not being passed along to the customers. So then we went to the Senate. Same thing, a battle every step of the way. It tied up in the Senate 25-25. And Frank O'Bannon was the lieutenant governor and president of the Senate. So the president of the Senate could break all tie votes. So he's presiding when it comes down 25-25, and after a long pause, he votes aye. So it passes 26-25. And it goes to Evan Bayh, who's governor, for his signature. And he told me before the session started that he was in favor of this bill passing, and if I could get it passed, that he would be happy to sign it. So it went to Evan Bayh, and it sat there on his desk for 3 weeks, I think. And then he vetoed it. And all hell broke loose among the beer wholesalers who knew that he had promised to sign it. And then a huge celebration from the retailers who had accused him of taking a bribe from the Anheuser-Busch Company, when in fact it was a campaign contribution of like 10 grand. So anyway, they accused him of taking a $10,000 bribe and flooded the governor's office with phone calls against it. And basically, he just caved in to the pressure and vetoed the bill and told me, he said, we've got a lot of important elections coming up, including yours and mine, and I just decided that it was too controversial to sign it. I said, but you promised me you'd sign it if we got it passed. And I said, a lot of people have worked awfully hard to pass this thing. And he said, well, things have changed. What I found out later was that he had forced the Democrat Central Committee to pay for a poll as to the people's reaction to the beer baron bill. And so I don't think the poll had much of a chance when you ask people about beer baron. Nobody's for beer barons. But that's not what we were. We were family businesses that were getting slaughtered by wholesalers coming in from small towns and selling the beer too cheap, and then retailers not passing those savings along to the consumer. So he didn't understand what he was doing. He just knew that it wasn't popular. So a few years later, when Frank O'Bannon was governor, then we got it passed and got it signed. But by then we were down to 33 wholesalers. So we lost over 200 family businesses for no good reason.
Wow.
And it was a war between the beer wholesalers and the retailers. And those hard feelings still last to this day. But it was really a shame.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my most controversial bill.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see. Now, turning a corner here to sort of big picture reflective questions on your career. Did you have any regrets as a legislator?
Well, I think if I had to do it over again, that I might have one of two things. I either should have stepped down in 90 and not been talked into running again, or I should have stayed longer and been more patient and, worked my way up into maybe a leadership role or a committee chairman. The most that I was able to accomplish was to get on the Ways and Means Committee. And that really helped Ball State University more than any other constituent that I had.
Okay.
And I could have continued to do that. I guess my biggest regret is the decision I made in 90 to run again, but then to step down after the 91 session. And then my second regret was to trust Evan Bayh.
Okay.
I never should have trusted Evan Bayh.
Let's see. What was your proudest moment as a legislator?
Well, two things come to mind. We used to have money to spend. Individual legislators used to have money to spend in the budget for special projects back home. And in Muncie, in Delaware County, we had this dilapidated children's home that was really an embarrassment. And three of us, Senator Allie Craycraft and State Representative Hurley Goodall and I, made the decision to pool our money that we had to spend and rebuild or build a new children's facility. And Delaware County matched our money. And right now there's a beautiful youth services building where an old dilapidated two-story house used to stand, bigger than a house, kind of a dormitory. And so that was a wonderful thing. And then Ball State has on its campus a laboratory school called Burris, Burris, And Burris had been a laboratory school for many years on Ball State's campus for teaching, and they wanted to turn it into an academy. In addition to being Burris School, they wanted to turn it into an academy for math and sciences, and they wanted money in the budget, $9 million in the budget, to refurbish the school and bring it up to standards before they did that. And my old buddies, the Indiana State Teachers Association, were opposed to that money being spent, and they were also opposed to the fact that each school in the state of Indiana could send 2 of their best students to this academy. And so I had to make a personal appeal to the Indiana State Teachers Association to stand down and not oppose this $9 million to upgrade the school and establish this Indiana Academy for Math and Science.
Okay.
And they did. They stood down. The money went into the budget, and now we have a wonderful program there for talented kids who are so talented that the board, kind of bored at their old high school, but here they thrive when they're among other students just as gifted, and they push each other to new heights, and it's been a real success story ever since it was started. So I'm proud of that. I met a woman then in Bloomington once, and we were talking about my legislative career, and in fact, she was a neighbor across the street, and we were talking one day about my legislative career, and she asked the same question. She said, what was your fondest memory? And I said the establishment of the Gifted and Talented Academy at Burris at Ball State, and she starts crying. I thought, well, that's not really something to cry about.
Right.
And she said, it saved my son's life.
Wow.
She said he was not at all happy where he was in Bloomington schools, and was getting into kind of a bad way mentally. And she said he went to this school, and she said, I firmly believe that it saved his life. So I don't know. It was a touching moment.
Yeah, sure.
And it came out of nowhere. I mean, it was years after that we had done that. But so I'd say the replacing the old dilapidated children's home and establishing the Math and Science Academy at Ball State are probably the 2 I like the most.
Yeah, okay. What advice would you give to future legislators or even current legislators?
Just calm down. Quit worrying about the next election.
Yeah.
Legislators come and legislators go, and great, you're a state legislator, but get over it. Start doing the right thing and quit worrying about the next election. Loosen up a little bit, have a little fun. This is a great place to be at the General Assembly in the State House. I love being in the State House. It's a beautiful building, and it's the center of the political universe in Indiana. Future leaders are, being groomed there every day. But they're on both sides of the aisle, and right now we got 2 camps that don't intermingle. Just because the gerrymandered maps make it impossible for someone to look like they ever cooperated or compromised with the other side. And they're missing a lot. They're missing a lot in terms of friendships.
Yeah.
They're missing a lot in terms of fun. They're wound up too tight, and we're dealing with issues that are red meat issues, push button issues that are more about the next election than they are about making Indiana a better place to live and work. So, get over it. Do the right thing and quit worrying about the next election.
Yeah, okay. What, in your opinion, is the most important work of the Indiana General Assembly?
Well, the budget, the biennial budget, is something that they need to spend appropriately. It's something that they need to spend a little more money on things that need to be done in Indiana. We didn't need this tax rebate where everybody in Indiana gets $100, or whatever it is on their tax return. We needed them to spend that money on infrastructure or on paying teachers more or hiring more firemen or policemen, or, for God's sakes, cleaning up the water in Indiana. We rank as the dirtiest water in the country.
Yeah.
What an awful thing to say about your state.
Yeah.
We just don't seem to care about the environment. And we're leaving this to our kids and our grandkids. So you need to, I'm not saying you need to raise more money. Just quit giving us, tax breaks that we're not asking for. Fix the place up so our kids and our grandkids don't inherit it in the shape it's in now. So leave it better than you found it. That'd be my advice. Leave Indiana better than you found it.
Yeah.
And quit worrying about the next election.
What would you say the people of Indiana? What would you say the people of Indiana don't know about the Indiana General Assembly and how it operates?
How badly the gerrymandered political maps make it to get anything done.
Yeah.
They don't understand the gerrymandering. They hear the word, and they might think about it for a minute while it's on TV or in the newspaper, but the truth is they don't really understand how this has broken the system down to where it simply doesn't work in their best interest. And the only way that the only way the majority party, whether it's Democrat or Republican, the only way the majority party is going to abandon gerrymandering is if the people demand it. Now, the only states where they have established a commission to draw the maps is in states where citizens can propose and vote on a referendum. Referendum states have two things. They've got marijuana, and then they've got commissions to draw the maps. Now, I don't know how people are going to feel about Indiana landing in that camp, but I'm just saying that the majority party in a state like Indiana, where there are no referendums, is not going to give up drawing the maps unless people insist on it. Now, I don't know, except at the ballot box, how they're going to insist on it, but they just don't understand, the public doesn't understand how bad our government is right now because of gerrymandered maps. They're so sophisticated. In the old days, like I said earlier, they just kind of drew them out of their shirt pocket. And now, every 10 years, the sophistication increases exponentially. And the maps, the computer, the software. And so legislators run scared of their district because if they win the primary, it's really easy in the fall, but the primary just has them scared to death, and it shouldn't. The primary shouldn't have you scared to death. You should be worried about the fall election, not the spring election. And the public doesn't understand that.
Yeah. How has the state of Indiana changed over the course of your lifetime?
Well, politically, there are no Democrats left in southern Indiana. When I got to the legislature, quite a few Democrats came from southern Indiana and from the cities. But now, Democrats are only coming from the urban areas. So the rural areas of Indiana have become Republican, and it didn't used to be that way. I don't know. I mean, Indiana has lost a lot of manufacturing that was prevalent when I was growing up. In Muncie, we had Warner Gear, we had Delco Battery, we had others that don't come to mind right now. But, I mean, there were thousands of jobs in the automotive industry in Muncie. They're all gone. Same thing with Richmond, Marion, Kokomo, Lafayette, Terre Haute, just decimated. Cities like Muncie, one time Muncie had 3 high schools: Muncie Central, Muncie Northside, Muncie Southside. Now they're back down to 1 high school, Muncie Central, and it's not nearly as big as it used to be. So, Indiana's getting older as young people leave for brighter, greener pastures. So I miss all those manufacturing jobs, where people without a college education could make a good living, and they're gone forever. So we have to do a better job of giving our students educational opportunities that will lead to jobs in new industries, not manufacturing. And we need to figure out how to spend the money properly to get that done.
Yeah. How have the people of Indiana changed?
Well, like everywhere else, I think they're more partisan in their thinking than they were growing up. I think growing up it was a little more laid back, and people were Americans first, and maybe Republican or Democrat second or third. And now it just seems to me that there's too many people that are Americans second.
Okay.
And I think that's pretty sad.
And how have the people of Indiana not changed?
There's still people that come here from other states say we're still, really friendly.
Okay.
And, I think Hoosiers are basically friendly, nice people in a superficial way.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you dig beneath the surface that we're a little meaner than we used to be. But when people come here, they're very pleased with their experience. So we must be doing something right.
Right. Last question. What do you want the people of Indiana to know about their influence on the Indiana General Assembly?
Well, I think that their influence is if they're registered to vote, then, the General Assembly knows where the votes are. And they know basically how those people intend to vote. And so if you're not registered to vote, if you're not voting, then nobody, at the General Assembly, it's all about politics. So if you're not registered to vote and you're not voting, then you basically don't really count.
Yeah.
So the only way to protect yourself is to vote and to be involved at the local level. You don't have to travel to Indianapolis. You can wait until your legislator has an event back home and go to it. Wait in line to talk to them afterwards, or raise your questions in the public setting. But at least at the local level, vote and be involved enough to show up and voice your concerns.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you want to mention?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Really? Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there'll be a lot of interesting things to add to the project with your interview. So.